Hi, welcome to another installment of No Smoke, Just a Vapor. I'm Asanda Goyi, your host for today. Today we are joined by Mr. Sello Frans Machate, who is a former executive of the National Press Club, as well as a founder, not co-founder, founder of PINA News. Mr. Frans, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank,
Welcome.
thank you so much for the invitation, Asanda and the team. We are really happy to be here.
Media, an important role player in any industry. I mean, as the fourth estate, the media has a very big responsibility in ensuring that consumers have access to accurate information. In your view, how has the South African media landscape changed over the past couple of years?
I think we need to first appreciate that media makes and media breaks. And I think over the years, and particularly looking at my own role in the media for the past 20 years or 2 decades, I think there's been a number of changes or evolution in the media space. So one thing that we need to do, I think, in that space, it's mainly to make sure that we use it in the right way. Also, adhering to the journalistic principles or the professional ethics, the industry's ethics. So I think that is one thing that is very important in that space.
So looking at an organized body like the National Press Club, what's the significance of having such a body? And tell us about what it is that you are doing with the National Press Club.
Okay, I think it's fair that I start from when I joined the National Press Club around 2007. So when I joined the organization around that time, you'll understand this is an organization that is over 45 years old. And at the time when I joined, um, there was no much transformation. It was still mainly white and men dominated at the time. But I am so excited that, the teams that I worked with from the time when I joined the National Press Club around 2007 and also served on the executive committee from 2008 has played a significant role in making sure that there is a transformation. And in this almost 40 years at the time, or around 30 something years at the time, I've had to see the first black chairperson of the organization. I've had to see the first the first female chairperson at the time. I saw the first young chairperson who happened to be a female at the time of the National Press Club, which is something that has not happened. And also, around that time, there has been a number of transformations. So that is why I'm saying in that time, I'm so excited that together with the teams, the executive committee teams that I worked with between 2008 and until 2016, and even beyond when I came back to the rebuilding of the press club after it's it being on the edge of collapsing post COVID-19. We have worked very hard to make sure that there is transformation, and I'm excited that where I leave it today, there's still also there are some continuations, and I hope this continues. But then the role of the National Press Club, I think, and other organizations such as the South African National Editors Forum, Safria, and others, I think it's mainly to make sure that the professional ethics are adhered to. But apart from that, what are the needs of the media workers? What are the needs of the communicators? Because some of them also represent communicators. What are their needs? Are they being served? But at the same time, are they adhering to the professional standards? So I think that is where the role of institutions such as the National Press Club and others should be playing, and I think they are playing that role.
Let's talk about professional standards. So you've got, I mean, over the years, the economic landscape has moved quite dramatically. In your own experience, when you look at media from back then and now, how has the industry morphed, taking into account mainstream as well as independent offerings like PINA News?
I think one thing that we need to appreciate is that kind of evolution where there has been new media coming into the space, but that also need to be approached with caution. So the challenges that we still have between the two is that with the mainstream media, they will mostly focus on the financial gains rather than just looking at the the story on its own. So that is, I think, that is a challenge on its own. But however, even under those circumstances, one thing that need to be considered is the journalistic principles, which are those of being fair, unbiased, and accurate at all times. Because once you lose that, it does not only impact on the the particular media institution or media house, but it also goes beyond that, and it affects almost everyone in the space, where now the profession becomes discredited.
Yeah. And I mean, it's an important thing when it comes to journalistic integrity, you know, where you say the stories need to be balanced, you need to be fair, etc. But when you look at industries that are potentially controversial, like the vaping industry, where we've over the years seen that one side is often taken, you know, what do you attribute that to? Is it a lack of knowledge? What's happening? Help us understand.
From where I sit, I think it's mainly the lack of information or that knowledge, you know. But I think what we need to then do is, as media, we've got a role as well to play, which is that of educating. Because I think, or not that I think, but that is one of the bases. Educating is one of the bases that media houses need to play. What role are you playing in educating? So that is what one of the questions that we need to ask as media houses, to say, what role are we playing in educating? So in that lack of information, then it is our role as media houses, whether mainstream or independent, to play that particular role, to educate and make sure that we inform, because that is part of our deliverables, to inform. But how do you inform? That then goes to by educating. So this is where we need to play that role. But also, these new industries, they also need to avail this information for us to be able to engage, you know. Because, for example, as a journalist, if I do not really have particular information on a particular subject, how then am I empowered to educate others, or to use the platform that I have, or the power platform that I have to educate? So I think it's also going back to these emerging or new industries to also make sure that there's sufficient information available.
And I think oftentimes we take for granted that, I mean, in as much as yes, you'll educate yourself, but there's also capacity issues, you know, in the newsrooms today when you look at retrenchments and all of these things. So you have fewer journalists and the stories are not getting fewer, you know? So that's something I think that we also need to be mindful of. But when you say the industries also need to capacitate the media, how do you go about doing that as the vaping industry? So we are concerned that media is not covering both sides. What do we do?
From where I sit, on the question that you're asking, I think sometimes it might also be our own mistake as media, whereby we do not really go through the available legislation on these subjects. Because sometimes one, from where I sit, I think one might think that, you know, giving the vaping industry more platform to talk might actually be against the tobacco and the bills that are there, that, you know, don't really promote or have some restrictions on was that nicotine products advertising, or, you know,
Kinds of
giving platform. So it's also coming back to us. How far do we go on to reading on these legislations? How much information is available to us? But what you talked about on the issue of newsrooms being shrinked, I think it's also not just because people are leaving, but I think it's also because these media houses try to have lesser expenses by employing, let's say, not very experienced journalists, because they know they are not that expensive to 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 run the operations of the media, of the newsroom, or of the of the media house. So I think that is also another thing where they're trying to cut costs, but that also then creates another problem. I'm not sure if you are still coming to that one, but which is the problem of now having a lot of responsibility on one journalist. Then you can't really be all over.
Yeah.
Then what do? You normally then rely on just calling people to say, there's this story, do you know about it? And then one source just says, yes, this is true, and they give you only one side of the story. And remember, in any news article, you need to have some balance. That is why we're talking about the balance. Getting at least more than one part, one side of a story, then making sure as well that it is accurate. So in that space, you've got a journalist, a junior journalist that has got a lot of responsibilities. Instead of being on the field investigating stories, they rely only on one source so that they can finish with this particular article and then run to the next and run to the next. And some of the journalists in a day, they have to file about 8 stories. And how do you manage, And from their traditional journalism space where I come from, we used to be on the field throughout. But now journalists are just stationed in the newsrooms, working on the calls, working on the social media, and that then creates that problem of misinformation as well, because that is where the space of the issues of misinformation comes in and find a space into the newsrooms.
And I mean for me, that's something that is actually worrying when you consider. I mean, when in my introduction I said the role of the media. I mean, back then I studied journalism like 20 years ago. We were told that you are the fourth estate, and you can
Still.
yes, and but when you look at it in now and how you have questions, is it even possible to be objective, But that's a conversation for another day. But when you look at the points you've raised about inexperienced individuals, people who are overworked, and you have to file a lot of stories, that obviously compromises what you put out there. And besides just the quality, there's also the misinformation, and wars have been started by misinformation. People have died because of misinformation. So the consequences are dire, when you have those kinds of things. So we are just a small industry, and we have concerns where you find that clearly what you're writing is false, At the very least, you could have made an effort to reach out to say, let me find out what your point of view is. And we notice there's also beyond just the capacity, but there's also I had a deadline, like I couldn't reach out to you, So what do you do as an individual, as an industry, when you come upon stories that do not reflect the truth about your industry, or do not reflect the truth? What can you do? What should I do?
The notion that I had deadlines and all those things is not sufficient. The key is going back to the basics. If you understand, and I think that is why journalism training is important. That is the reason it is important, because that is where you are taught about these principles. And if you follow I think most of the time there are not even more than 4, the things that you need to follow and make sure that your story is accurate, your story is balanced. And, it just needs one to adhere to those things. I don't think there's any excuse to misinformation. And particularly as the fourth estate, as you rightfully said, we have a responsibility. We have the nation and we have the world on our shoulders as the media, because we, like I said in the beginning, that we as the media, we can make or break. So we have that responsibility. Imagine the frustrations and confusions that were created by misinformations around the COVID-19 during that time. Although government and professional bodies were putting out information, but sometimes we ran with misinformation. So where are the basics? When you get, I was trained that when you get information, and I think that is the same training that you received as a journalist, when you get information from Asanda, you need to question the motive. What could be the motive of Asanda giving me this story? And a journalist, a proper journalist will not just take that side and run with it. You need to then do your own investigation on that particular story. So I do not find any excuse for misinformation, particularly if you're a journalist. I don't think I can forgive such, because you need to be accurate, you need to be balanced, research. And that is why I'm saying, as journalists, we need to do our research, make time to find facts beyond the issues that we receive, or beyond the things that we are told on face value.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I think I'm hoping more journalists will listen to this, because really, I mean, when you look at, you had mentioned earlier the issue of regulations, specifically in this industry, that whatever comes out in media, perception is everything. And oftentimes people don't need to prove that it's true or false. You just run with it, And unfortunately, when you look at the bill in its current form, a lot of the stuff that's in that bill we can be traced back to misinformation. And where does the misinformation come from? It comes from the media. So I think there's a lot of work, and I do agree with you 100% that there's never an excuse in misrepresenting stuff. So going forward, what are some of the things that you believe can be done differently? I mean, we have a wish list. You've said the research, but what are the two top things that if someone put these in place and ensured they don't move away from these things, everything else should fall into place? What would you say those are for journalists in particular?
I think you know the answer by now, which is accuracy. And personally, accuracy is my passion. Like being accurate in whatever news article you take out, that is very key. Two, what is the motive behind that? As well, going back to your role as the media to educate, empower the society with information, because I think that is key role, and that is what we normally preach as journalists, to say we have the responsibility to inform the nation. But how do you inform the nation if you feed them misinformation, if you feed them information that you did not research further? How sure are you, and how proud are you that you did that role or that responsibility of informing the nation?
And as we could go on forever, but as a last, time is not on our side. As a last question, Frans, when you look at, the focus is on, obviously on the vaping industry, but when you look at the information that goes out there, there's both information that says this thing is bad and this thing is good, So you've got two polarized ideas around this particular industry. And what we found is you find an editor saying, I'd rather err on the side of caution and be in the middle. Therefore, if a story comes out and says, yay, vaping works, they won't cover that, because they are afraid that if it turns out it doesn't work, then they would have been part of this propaganda machine, that. So how do you balance those things out? Because, from someone who is not in the industry, I would also be cautious, because you've got two extremes. You've got, the bill in its current form is grounds for why we are so polarized, because some of us are saying, based on science, this thing is useful. Some are saying, based on science, this thing is not good. So how do you protect yourselves as media without compromising the information that you owe to South Africans, while yet still striking that balance?
I think it goes back to where we had specialized journalists that are specialized in particular leads. Unfortunately, now I think that is also going down. We no longer really have journalists that are specialized on, for example, sports, specialized on entertainment, health, and so on and so on. So I think that was more significant in the industry, and particularly in making sure that sufficient information about any subject is there. Because if you are a specialized journalist on a particular subject, maybe law, then you'll always make sure that whatever you're reporting on, you have all the facts. You dwell deeper into the facts. And like I mentioned, and you also highlight now that, we also have the bill where the media is not really that sure where does it put the vaping industry in. So, that is the problem. But if we then have, or we go back to this specialization, which is one thing that media houses are afraid of, because they're trying to cut costs. If you've got an entertainment journalist, a health journalist, education journalist, these are the journalists that are going to focus mainly on that particular lead or that particular beat. But now you've got a journalist that does everything. From here, I have to rush to court to cover a particular court case. From the court case, I have to go to cover politics somewhere because there's a youth league match, maybe from where to where, from point A to point B. From there, you need to go to where do you find time to look deeper into this subject that you are addressing in your articles. So I think that is where the problem is. And if somehow we stop prioritizing finances than the profession and safeguarding it, I think that is where we'll have everything given more attention.
Yes. That's a perfect spot for us to leave it. Thank you so much for your time. As Frans said, there is never an excuse to give misinformation. The onus on media is to be accurate. You need to get the facts. You need to make sure that you are fair. And I think in nascent industries like the vaping industry, it's very imperative because the information that is shared about vaping products could be a matter of life and death, essentially, for consumers. So thank you once again for watching, and we see you next time.